All right, seeing people jump on here. So very, very excited. Hi, my name is Anna Tony. I am the Executive Director here at Leadership Toledo, and I would like to welcome you to our inaugural Community Leadership Series. We are so excited to launch this new initiative to you today, and very thankful to be able to provide this at no cost. And that is because of the generosity of our sponsor of the First Energy Foundation. So thank you, thank you, thank you. 2020 has been a year, and here at Leadership Toledo, we know that strong leadership is more crucial now than ever. So no matter where you are in your leadership journey, this series will provide the opportunity for you to look inward and outward and identify where you can grow as a leader and where you can step up as a leader right now. So while this is a Leadership Toledo event, we have people joining from all over the place. We have people from Leadership Johnson County in Franklin, Indiana, Leadership Pinellas in Clearwater, Florida, Leadership Sandy Springs, the Iowa Economic Development Authority, EduKids in Canada. I mean, it's incredible, the response that we've had, and not to mention all of, I know we have a lot of alum who are joining us here today, so thank you for the support. It really means a lot. So a friendly reminder to use the chat for any questions that you have, and I will make sure that our presenter, Sara, gets those. So enough from me. Let's get to the good stuff. Kicking us off today, we have Sara Best, Leadership Toledo alum from 2008, and she is also the principal and co-founder of Real Good Ventures. Sara is a people and team development champion with over 25 years of experience serving global, national, and regional organizations of all sizes and scope in both the for-profit and nonprofit sectors. Sara believes strong leadership creates the powerful change needed to make a better world. Sara is a certified practitioner of the Predictive Index, a certified emotional intelligence assessment administrator, as well as an experienced emotional intelligence performance team and executive coach. She holds a bachelor's degree in social work from The Ohio State University and administration from Eastern Michigan University. So having worked with Sara over the years as a board member, I can attest to how lucky we are to have her talents and passion here in Toledo. So for those of you who have not had the pleasure of meeting Sara yet, you are in for a great treat. So Sara, I'm going to pass it over. So let's get this fun started.
Awesome. Anna, thank you so much. I am humbled and honored to kick off the Community Leadership Series. And I want to say a big thank you to you, to your team at Leadership Toledo, and the folks who made this pivot possible. So since we can't be meeting live and in person for the signature Leadership Toledo program, making something like this available to our community and beyond says a lot about how important Leadership Toledo is to Toledo and our region. So thank you for that. And not only the organizations, other Leadership Toledo organizations, but many, many local organizations, ProMedica, United Way, City of Toledo, Trinity Toledo, numbers of school systems. We've got the universities present today, Rudolph Libby, Manahan. We've got nonprofits, for-profits, big corporations, small solopreneurs. So I think we're all in this together. And it really is, it's wonderful to talk about things that I continue to try to master myself. So here today to kick this off, we're going to be talking about the secret to leadership is not what you think. And leadership is an important topic. Otherwise, we wouldn't be spending $366 billion globally annually to try to develop leadership. And $166 billion of that is right here in the United States. And I think we understand, that there's a need for influence and for increased leadership. There's all kinds of ideas and thoughts out there about what it takes to be a good leader. But I'd like for today just to kind of distill down to something that I've discovered or believe is very essential to any other thing that we deploy within our leadership. So we'll get to that in a moment. But first, we're going to start with a poll. And Anna, well, let's see, you know what, here it is, I can do it. We're gonna have a simple poll, so hopefully you can weigh in just from where you are. The question is, are you a leader? Are you a leader? Yes or no? Good, we got a lot of answers coming in. Oh, I like what I'm seeing. I like what I'm seeing. Far and above, we'll go one more minute, one more second here. Couple more still coming in. About 136 people on our webinar today. Nice. So I'm going to end the poll right now and share the results. A whopping 93% of you said yes, you are a leader, and 7% said no. I think there's no wrong answer here. Certainly, you may not be a leader of people or process, maybe in your job or in your life, but we each in our own way are indeed leaders. It's about influence. Some of the definitions we've seen, like from the dictionary, leadership would say the action of leading a group, people, or an organization. Okay, I get that. Forbes says it's a process of social influence which maximizes our efforts and the efforts of others. So we're working toward the achievement of a goal. And I think the social influence part is where each of us has a definite impact and responsibility. And I would also add that if you in any way desire to connect to others in the community, if you're devoted to a cause, if you're someone who contributes to the well-being of other people, if you're interested at all in growing your own capabilities, you are indeed a leader. So again, the definitions of leadership are broad and wide. One of my most favorites, however, is becoming the best version of yourself. And so Anna mentioned in the beginning that, you know, it's inside and outside. We're going to talk today about what happens on the inside. So another opportunity to hear from our participants today. I'm pretty sure we each have an idea of what leadership is not, what good leadership is not. So if you would, visualize and think of a person who's been maybe your manager, your boss, a colleague, even a close friend or loved one who definitely, in your opinion, did not demonstrate good leadership. And if you could choose one word to describe that person, please put that in the chat feature. One word, maybe arrogant or selfish, or maybe it's a phrase, didn't listen. Whatever that phrase would be, if you would share that now, we'll take a look at that. Good, and Anna, if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing with us what's rolling in, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Selfish, authoritative, self-focused, condescending, disrespectful, intimidated, emotionally unintelligent, arrogant, poor communicator, egocentric, intimidated by strong females, complacent, in it for themselves, fake. We got lots of stuff here.
Yeah.
Dominant, taking credit for the actions of others, lacking compassion, a lot of egotistical that we're seeing.
Yes. Yeah, so we can be aligned and agreed that people we consider or experience as poor leaders have some qualities and characteristics that are challenging for us. I always like to say, though, never waste a good opportunity to learn from a bad boss. And by that, I mean, sometimes the people we encounter who are indeed the most challenging for us are in fact our best teachers. And I hated it when I heard this some years ago, but as I began to sort of let this truth sink in, it really helped me that, you know, the people or the characteristics in people that we do not like are oftentimes the characteristics we don't recognize in ourselves. Or maybe we do recognize them, but we are unwilling to deal with them. So it's true that we can celebrate definitely what we learn from people who are challenging for us. So let's talk about what healthy and strong leadership looks like in the same fashion. Visualize and think about that manager, that boss, that person who definitely, you know, in your experience showed great leadership and helped move you along your path. So a couple words, if you would, in the chat feature about how you would describe that person.
Humility, willing to learn, encouraging, compassionate, mentorship, who encourages growth, devoted to mission, servant leadership, leads by example, brutally honest, seeking advice from those, oh gosh, they're coming in so fast, humble, open, teacher, selfless, transparent, encouraging, supportive.
Yeah.
See what else we have here. Good communication, motivating, high expectations, seeking advice from those they lead.
Yes.
Good.
Wow. And all day long, I could stay in this news feed and this chat feed, because it certainly attests or helps us understand what it is we each kind of seek and desire from those that lead us. And the secret to leadership, it was shared not once, but twice in the chat feature. So if you don't hear anything else today that I say, hear this, that, the secret to leadership is indeed humility. I think that all that we're going to talk about today will point us to the idea that we have to master and that we can grow this ability called humility. It's not thinking less of yourself, says C.S. Lewis. It's thinking of yourself less. And it's more than that. I think it's being the right size, being the right size. And let me just say a few words about being the right size. It's not being too big on the inside so that we discount other people's opinions or perspectives. We discount their experience. And it's also not being too small on the inside so that we don't deliver on that influence and deliver on our skills and abilities in a way that powerfully impacts other people. So more often than not, I encounter people who are too small on the inside. And they may or may not be aware of it, but when they're too small on the inside, they can actually show up as too big on the outside. Aggressive, assertive, defensive, arrogant, selfish. So there's this work that we can do, and it's an ongoing journey to become the right size, for sure. And we would say that humility and leadership are an inside job. Okay, so what's going to help us do that? How do we begin? And some of you, by the way, are naturally predisposed to be a bit more humble than me, for sure. We'll talk about your reference profile in a minute. And by the way, let me just hit the pause for a minute and say, if you did not yet receive your reference profile as a pre-work to this session, some of you had the opportunity to complete the predictive index. If you did not receive your reference profile, look in the chat feature. John Brower, my amazing partner, is there to, he's going to put his email address in the chat feature. You need to reach out to John. It may have, your email may have gotten caught in your spam folder. Perhaps you didn't yet have a chance to take the predictive index. No worries. You'll be able to access that after our session today. But for our purposes today, we are going to be working toward you unpacking a little bit about yourself. So you'll want to have that handy, and feel free to reach out to John right now if you did not receive that. So what's going to help us develop this muscle around humility? Well, it's a term I think many of us are very, very familiar with now. It's the number one sort of quality or characteristic most people feel they need in a manager or leader. It's self-awareness. It's really beginning to understand all that you have that's good, all that you have that's challenging. And it's certainly about understanding what you think about and what you feel and why that happens. So self-awareness is the mechanism we'll use to help us develop that humility. And what we'd say is, hey, self-awareness gives you, the opportunity to perfect your gifts and talents and to be able to deploy those, but it also gives you an opportunity then to better understand other people. So the more we know and understand what's happening with us, the more effective we are at understanding and appreciating how we're similar and different from other people. And then thirdly, it helps us understand what is needed for us to be successful in the work. So it's us, it's you, others, and work. And just a real quick thought about Real Good Ventures. I mentioned my partner, John Brower. I'm sure he'll jump in here and share some comments at some point. But we consider ourselves a talent optimization consultancy, and we're passionate about people finding joy and fulfillment in their work. We spend way too many hours of the day and giving way too much of our energy to the work cause, and oftentimes with little fulfillment and feelings of little success. So our passion is all about helping people find, more fulfillment, more passion, and making a better world through better work. And there's John right now. So I'm a persuader. I am socially poised, articulate, probably say more than I should. Oftentimes I move at a pretty fast pace, and I like to have things look good. John is a captain pattern. He's able to see the big picture. He likes to have change, but he also likes to manage how that change happens. Those are our reference profiles. So now we're kind of digging into what hopefully you had a chance to understand and receive about yourself. And again, no worries if you don't happen to have a reference profile. It's a one-pager. It's going to look like this. It'll have your icon at the top, and it'll have some description for you. So let's take a little look at and unpack these reference profiles. Let me just start by saying, as a talent optimization consultancy, we use a lot of different tools and instruments, and behavioral data can be achieved a lot of different ways. Some of you are familiar with the Berkman, the MBTI, the DISC. There are lots of different formats or tools with which you can gather this data. We just happen to use predictive index, and that's what we're referencing today. But self-awareness and humility starts with understanding some of those natural behavioral drives. So we encourage you to continue to seek that out, no matter what tool you use. So the reference profiles are groupings or families of very common behavioral characteristics. There are 17 of them, and we would refer to these as your neighborhood. They are more general, but they will help identify for you common strengths, things that you need to have to be successful in your work, help you understand where there might be some traps and challenges, and what would be typical things we could expect from you in the workplace. Lastly, it tells us a little bit about how best to work with you. So all in that one-page description is just a wealth of information about you. These reference profiles are broken down into groupings. So we have analytical profiles. Those are really geared more toward higher dominance and higher formality. Formality as a behavioral drive is about precision, accuracy, a drive for perfection, things like that. We have our social profiles, and by the way, here we have the analyzer, controller, specialist, strategist, and venturer. I love the names of the reference profiles. They're simple. They don't really require a lot of definition. A venturer, you can tell that's somebody who's forward-facing, probably pioneering and undaunted. An analyzer, that's somebody who's going to be, looking for data and information and wanting to control how that's utilized. Okay, and our social profiles kind of concentrated around that high extroversion. So in the world of PI, we say extroversion and introspection. So it's about one drive of extroversion. These profiles, altruist, captain, collaborator, maverick, persuader, and promoter, have a high degree of extroversion. So they're very focused on the relationships and the social aspects of work, among other things I might add. Stabilizing profiles. This is about patience and steadiness. Adapter, craftsman, guardian, operator. These are the reference profiles that have a need for consistency and stability, and they bring to the table a sense of steadiness and order. And then last but not least, we have the persistent profiles. Individualist and scholar, and this is a combination of dominance and patience together. I always like to say that people that have that high degree of patience like to know what's going on. I happen to be married to a scholar. As a persuader, that's very interesting because I am very, very extroverted, very chatty. He is very private and introspective and analytical. I also have an individualist for a mom, and her approach to life, very similar to my husband's, is about kind of quiet, having great control over the routines and processes that are happening in her world. So those are your reference profiles. And I'm just gonna rely on you, Anna and John. If we have any questions or comments or things to respond to that may be coming into the chat feature, let me know. We'll definitely touch on those.
Hey, Sarah, it's
Yeah.
John. We have a lot of reference profiles going out, so just everybody, you're gonna receive them shortly.
Awesome. Yeah, I probably should have said that right in the beginning, John, so as not to inundate you 20 minutes into the hour here. But as you're waiting for your reference profile, and maybe some of you may have a guess about where you fall, we can group these reference profiles into individual leadership styles. In fact, they map out to strategy, they map out to team configurations as well. But in this particular case, we're going to break down these 4 individual leadership styles. Part of our self-awareness is to begin to understand our natural propensity, our natural drives, and our natural leadership style. And also, we'll talk about a couple patterns that fit here, reference profiles that fit here right in the middle, because they're what we call flexors. They can actually work in all 4 quadrants. So let's talk about the exploring leadership style. That's where I reside. Persuader, captain, maverick, and venturer. Certainly, you'll see listed here some characteristics that are really common. Daily things you could observe. They prefer risk-taking and novelty, things that are new and different and exciting. Act quickly and urgently. Avoid structure and process. I may or may not relate to that. You can ask my partner, John. But the day-to-day behavioral styles and preferences are things that we can count on when it comes to this exploring sort of leadership style. Let me pause for a moment too and say, there's no leadership style or reference profile or even behavioral drive that is good or bad or better or worse than another. So, this is a neutral set of information that we're using to gain self-awareness and insight. It's easy to call it good or bad. I think anything in an extreme form can certainly create a challenge for us. So we'll think about it in that way. But from an exploring perspective, we would say that they like to see the big picture, definitely like a challenge, like to work independently. Doesn't mean you don't appreciate and work with people, but you are able to work without, the approval or, connection to other people, and very people oriented. So in daily operations, there are some times that we experience challenges here in the exploring leadership style. And it would be things like, when we don't adhere to a structure that's been put in place for a reason. It would be limited follow-up or attention to detail. The tendency to not listen very well. I was just sharing with someone this morning that I think for the 4th time this week, my husband said, yeah, I told you that last week. And I thought, I move fast and sometimes I forget to listen. So too quick to act sometimes, and definitely can be authoritarian and brusque. So from an exploring leadership style, there's this strength capacity, but there's also a bit of a challenge. And I would say under pressure. So when the heat gets turned up, when we are in times of incredible challenge, like right now, we might even see exploring leaders becoming more disruptive, more talkative. We say sucking the oxygen out of the room. So there's an intensity and even being jacked up that happens under this crisis or pressure turned up kind of environment. So exploring leaders, we need to begin to appreciate those strength capacities that we have and how those can be challenging for others, especially when the energy and the heat get turned up. All right, we're going to move on to the next one, which is producing. Oh, and by the way, signature to the exploring leadership style is that high dominance. So independence, kind of need to control and influence things, and a high extroversion. Very people oriented. In our producing style, competitive, driving, demanding, these leaders definitely have goals in mind, and it's all about the results. They can be very intense. But there's purpose behind that intensity. We'd go on to say too that they're disciplined, strong in execution, self-motivated, innovative. These are such great words. Like if you were writing your resume, you'd want to be including some of this descriptive language in the description of yourself. Builds structure and has respect for the plan. These are powerful too. Proactive and anticipates problems. So these producing leaders have this strength capacity, but also can be a challenge. And by the way, it's controller, analyzer, strategist, and scholar. That's what makes up the producing leadership style. So under normal conditions, those high standards that they hold for themselves and other people can be a little challenging, very perfectionistic. They're skeptical by nature. So they'll ask a lot of questions and always want to come at things from the perspective of, where are the holes? We got to find the holes, and there probably are holes. Difficulty delegating authority. So a need to kind of control the details and control the outcome. And they do need at times a little runway for things to change. So a little runway to get your arms and your head around why we would want to make something be different, et cetera. So in the crisis situation, so when we find ourselves when the heat's turned up, those producing leaders definitely become overly controlling, or they can. They lack interpersonal sensitivity. So no warm and fuzzy, it's very businesslike, matter of fact. They may escape from people. They may want to just escape to their work, go heads down, and maybe try to, muster through, and they would do that not with people. Push process and structure on others, and being overly critical. So these are the people that sometimes can be perceived as micromanaging. Producing leaders. So signature to the producing leaders is high formality. Formality, by the way, is again that it's a drive for precision and accuracy, and higher dominance. So those of us that have higher dominance, we like our own ideas, and we like to be in control of our own ideas. So that's what we would say here about the producing leaders. Next up, the stabilizing leaders. All three of my kids are stabilizing patterns, which is kind of amazing. I really don't know how that happened, but we have the operator, craftsman, guardian, and specialist. And well-organized, coordinated, and efficient, I would say friendly, is definitely the name of the game. There's maybe take some time to make decisions until you have all the information, anticipates problems. This is a strength for that stabilizing group, thoughtful and conscientious. So nothing would be done rashly and without consideration for other people. Close attention to detail in most cases, and strong discipline on the execution of things. So that's stabilizing. And again, a very simple term, it implies just what we see. These are people that bring order, consistency, routine to the mechanism. Under pressure, well, we should say day in and day out though, where we can see challenge in that stabilizing pattern is the need to keep harmony. So there's a real concern sometimes about rocking the boat and talking about uncomfortable things, delivering bad news. So people in the stabilizing pattern tend to have lower dominance and therefore may be uncomfortable in addressing things directly. They're sensitive to criticism. So they take it very personally because they very personally put themselves in their work, do not like ambiguity. Some of us thrive in very chaotic environments. Others need to kind of know what's happening, what's coming, what's my role. So in times of incredible transition or challenge like we're in now, anything we can do to provide that clarity versus living in a lot of ambiguity. Some of it we can't control. That's what happens there with the stabilizing. And they don't respond well to pressure. So heat being turned up at the end of the day, getting a last minute assignment, shifting priorities, not very helpful for those in the stabilizing leadership style. Under crisis though, perfectionistic, overly analytical, rigid, maybe afraid to move, and very responsive versus proactive. So they may lack that urgency or that sense of urgency, and easy for them to withdraw if it's too much, just to walk away or unplug. Any thoughts or comments about what we've covered so far? So signature to the stabilizing leadership pattern or style is that high patience, steadiness, consistency, and that higher formality. So there's a command of the details. There's a plan. We're going to respect the plan. All right, we're moving on here. And our fourth area, our individual leadership style, is called cultivating. Supportive, transparent, and empathic. And again, the title implies exactly what it is, that these are people that focus on the relationship and focus on the team or the others. So we have a collaborator and a promoter here. Within this particular pattern in cultivating, we have people who are definitely focused on external things and helpful things. They want to be serving. They definitely have a steadiness to them, a diligence. It's about we, not I, in the cultivating style. We would also say that they make great team players until they maybe have to step up and ask for change on the team. That becomes sometimes a little bit challenging for the promoter and the collaborator to kind of take charge. They're much more comfortable being a collective on a team. Under pressure, they tend to withdraw, or in some cases, I've seen this happen with even a couple of my kids. They just kind of do it themselves. So rather than ask the person who maybe is tasked with that responsibility to do what they should do, they might just take it on and do it themselves because it's easier. They don't want to make a fuss or rock the boat, if that makes sense. In this cultivating style too, there is an emphasis on getting a pulse on how people feel. So being tuned in and empathic toward other people. Higher extroversion and higher patience are the two qualities or characteristics most definitive here of this cultivating style. So, they think about others first, and they think about, bringing people together, including people. And we could see how abilities here in this area are so significant, especially in the environment and tone that sometimes we're seeing today.
Hey,
So
Sarah.
there are, yep, is there a
I have
comment?
a couple questions. Yeah, there are a couple questions that have come in.
Yeah.
Can we fall between more than one leadership style? Maybe live in one leadership style, but have a few characteristics in another?
Yes, that's a great question. And it really depends on how your behavioral pattern plays out. So your reference profile is, again, your neighborhood. It's pretty general, but some of you you'll appear in more than one quadrant because of the way your actual behavioral graph is plotted. We would call that your street address. It's more specific about you, and it tells us a little bit more about each of those 4 drives. So that's a great question. Thank you.
And then the other one was about could your leadership style change with your experience and or age?
Sure. We could say definitely, what behavioral drives don't necessarily map out for us are the ways in which we've learned to adapt over the years, and certainly the environments in which we work. We would say, though, our general behavioral pattern, our 4 drives, if you will, stay pretty consistent, but we can flex and we can expand and adapt and become pretty natural at some of the other leadership styles.
I think you're kind of touching on this now, but Nancy just asked, can the people around you influence your leadership style? And I think you touched on that with adapting, because I think leader, it's obviously very important to be aware of who you're leading and knowing how people operate.
Absolutely. I think that we experience a perceived need to adapt because of who we're around. That's another thing, actually, that the behavioral assessment measures for us is, how it is that we perceive other people expect us to behave. So there's definitely influence from others in that particular data set. And it would help us understand whether what we are perceiving other people expect from us is doable or not. Is that a sustainable adaptation for me? If I'm naturally high in dominance, for example, I'm a persuader, and I'm perceiving the need to be very, very low in dominance and much more collaborative, maybe for a project, yes, but for a career or an occupation, that would not fit very well. So we do have that interface with our perception and what other people expect of us. Good ones. John, you want to add anything to these questions?
I'm kind of tied up here, Sarah.
Okay, yeah, that's right. You're sending out profiles, probably a million a minute here. Well, let me just add one more thing about the cultivating group. Good communicators, comfortable with routine. I would definitely say flexible and very focused on the group, but they can be overly people pleasing. So we find those of us that have that higher extroversion, I would be one of those. We tend to overpromise and potentially underdeliver because we're overly concerned about what other people may think about us or how they may feel about how we feel about them, if that makes sense. So wrapping up here, let's talk about this last little group here, the flexors. We call these special cases because it really does depend on your street address. So if you're an individualist, an altruist, or an adapter, it really depends on the intensity of those 4 behavioral drives for you, where you're gonna probably be most effective, but you have this unique capacity to be flexible. We would say situational. So you have some unique ability to adapt and therefore could be successful and have success in all 4. So you'll notice that too on your reference profile description. So as we kind of conclude the look at those reference profiles and look ahead, to, again, we're looking at self-awareness as a mechanism, as a medium in which we can develop greater humility, being the right size, I've talked about being a persuader. Most of the challenge I've encountered is when I realized that my frustration or upset in a situation or with a person has to do with not feeling important. So that high B, that high extroversion for me is about being liked and being appreciated and also needing to be important to the cause. So owning things, directing things, having my opinion matter. And, I spent a lot of time feeling yucky about that. Like, hey, that's not very humble of you. And that's really not helpful. However, it is the wiring that God gave me. So as I embrace that, as I become the right size about the fact that I am definitely outward facing and focused on people, the right size for me is recognizing that that's always going to pop up at first, and I can just move it to the side. It doesn't have to be my idea most of the time. It doesn't have to be about me. And that is about becoming the right size. And that's what we call not changing, but adapting. So one of the ways that we can really stretch into the leader style or the way in which we can cause greater positive influence over others is by learning the subtle things that we need to adapt. So actually, that's a great tee up for our next session next Wednesday, where we're going to break down 15 unique competencies of emotional intelligence. I'm going to walk through those with you so that you can actually identify which of those skills and abilities would be most helpful to you and most important to you to adapt. So part of it is understanding, on that reference profile, you're going to read about the challenges and the traps that you face. You probably kind of already know where it is you might present an obstacle, not only to yourself or to other people. So adapting starts with, first and foremost, going inside and figuring out, am I too big or too small? I fear that most of us feel too small on the inside. And we may not have taken enough time or directed enough effort to really uncover or unpack that. But let me tell you, if you do, what that makes available to you, being the right size, is so much more. Influence over other people, for example, being able to celebrate the successes and the wins of others without feeling somehow that you fall short. That comparison, being able to identify and really call out good things that other people do, even when they're better than you. It's awesome when you think about what becomes available when we do some work to really become the right size. So this behavioral information gives you an access. It boosts your self-awareness to say, okay, here are my natural behavioral drives. I move fast. I love action and variety. I'm very inattentive to detail. And honestly, I make a lot of mistakes. I've known this for years and years and years. I beat myself up about it. I have shame and guilt and feel really bad about it. But the reality is that doesn't help me and it doesn't help you. If I'm there to support you and move you further down the path, I have to clear that out of the way. So again, adapting is learning where are the places where maybe we need to dial a little bit in or push a little bit out. I'm thinking about my daughter who played volleyball in high school. She was a great team player and she had a lot of great insight to share about things that would make the team better. But she was hard pressed to speak about it in the group. And she could talk about everything else under the sun, but she never wanted to make people feel uncomfortable. And that became a challenge for her. It limited her ability to have positive influence over others. So I just say that no matter where you are, no matter what your position, whether you manage people, process, papers, puppies, it doesn't matter, that this is really all about leadership. The secret to leadership is finding that humility. Humility is not thinking about yourself less. It's really becoming the right size. It's thinking about yourself in the right way, understanding what you have that's good, recognizing what you have that presents a challenge, not ruminating on it, not obsessing about how to make it different, but accepting it and then finding ways to work with and around it. So that's what we mean by adapt. Any questions or comments, Anna, coming in right now? That went really fast.
No, not right. I'm not seeing that right now, but and maybe we'll talk about this next week, Sarah. But I would love to, as you talk about adapting, and I love that adapting is learning, and I think that's really that was a key takeaway for me right now. But and maybe can you talk to how that maybe would apply to what kind of you do in your community when it comes to especially looking at the crisis that we are facing right now with COVID and I mean some of the social issues that we've been seeing over the past few months. It's been a challenging year, and how can this information be used to address this?
Well, what a great prompt, what a great question. And I would even, as I share a thought to this, I would even ask others in attendance today to put their thoughts in the chat feed. Very powerful. In this day and age, it is so vitally important, essentially important, that we know who we are and what we stand for. I think that being the right size means that we're not too afraid to do things that we feel called to do. And we're not so big or so egotistical or so full of ourselves that we're not able to acknowledge or be vulnerable, that we might have a weakness. We might be part of the problem. So I think, this is a sort of an exercise in achieving some kind of balance. And each one of us has to really go inside in a time of, something we've never experienced before to say, what is it that matters most to me and how am I living into that? I'll tell you, one of the things I've done in the last 6 months is participate in a mastermind group. And it was facilitated by our local amazing expert, Diana Patton. It was called Pivot and Rise. And through my experience in that mastermind group, at the age of 53, I got clean and clear on some things that I didn't even know were issues for me all along. And they're wrapped up in my natural behavioral style. They're wrapped up in my emotional intelligence abilities, which sometimes are right there. And sometimes I really have to work to build them. So in this day and age, I think we have an opportunity to slow down, really slow down, go inside, spend some time inside, and do a little analysis. Where do we feel like we're strong? Where do we feel inhibited or afraid or limited? And then reach out to find out what we can do about that. And I promise you that people getting clean and clear on their natural behavioral drives is a great start. It explains a lot. When you deeply understand your reference profile and even your behavioral data, you begin to see how it is that things are frustrating or challenging for you. You begin to see how you get activated by a lot of different things. So it gives you then choices and options. And I hope that's a helpful answer. What are we seeing in the chat?
Yeah, I was just going to tell you. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with everything that I've taken away from this pandemic and stuff is the importance and kind of the gift we were given to slow down and to really take some time to say, okay, everything that I'm doing in my life, what's worth kind of going back to as we start to find our new rhythm and stuff. But Lisa asked, when looking at the profile we received, can you explain the average behavioral pattern again?
Let's see. Will you read that for me one more time?
It says, when looking at the profile we received, explain the average behavioral pattern again.
Well, okay, so what you see in the graphic there, and I don't happen to have one that I could show you right here. I can show you manually. It will, these don't have them. It's an average representation of that particular street address. So remember, the icon represents that neighborhood. It's a collection of behavioral attributes that sort of group together as a family in your neighborhood. Your profile will look a little distinct and different than the one you may see on your reference profile description because it's unique to you. So those factors might be a little bit wider, they might be a little more narrow, but they fall within that family of factors and that representation of that particular pattern.
Great. Debbie Peters, also a Leadership Toledo alum, she has asked, does culture or upbringing change the way we react to situations in addition to our personality?
Oh, absolutely. Hi, Debbie. And that is a great question. Definitely, it's a nature nurture component. So our natural behavioral drives combined with that which we experience in our family, in the world at the time we're born, the culture in which we live and have grown up, definitely has, we would argue, has influence.
Yeah, and there's some great comments here about, I mean, just in response to what you're saying, especially in regards to the pandemic and, what people have needed to do to adapt more to get our businesses moving forward. Chad said, are there resources we can find to determine our natural leadership styles?
Yeah,
We can share these slides too, right, Sarah?
absolutely. We'll share the slides, and you can by obtaining your reference profile, you can absolutely determine which of the 4 quadrants you're most likely to reside in. And if you'd like additional information, I'm just going to ask you to reach out to John at Real Good Ventures, or Sara, Sara, at Real Good Ventures. That would be good. One more thought about just adapting and what's happening in the world. There are many of us who would feel very comfortable with a plan, and the plans keep changing across every industry and every spectrum, even the guidelines. So those of us who are more comfortable with routine and certainty and having, a roadmap to follow, this ambiguity requires a lot of adapting, and it requires adjustment. And we'll talk about next week which emotional intelligence skills are going to help us in that area where, we have a comfort zone that we no longer exist in. And so now what do we do to continue to have influence and even to feel okay and successful?
Sarah, can I share something?
Yes, John.
First of all, thanks to everybody for your patience. I think we got everybody's reference profiles to them. We had a lot of people do it at the last minute. But to that point, what we were seeing from clients, and especially leaders, and the need for adaptation is just the sheer amount of change that is taking place in the world. And what's interesting, within the behavioral data, that behavioral DNA, we can actually predict how people will react and respond to change. So we don't call it change management, we call it adaptation management. And that's a whole nother area, but it's really helpful for leaders when you're trying to navigate and help people through this. So I'm sure more of that will be discussed in future sessions.
Oh, thank you, John. Hey, so up next, which is actually a week from today, it's part 2 of The Secret to Leadership Is Not What You Think. And, it is really building upon this idea of self-awareness, recognizing, hey, there are those of us who are highly assertive, for example, naturally assertive, we might need to build a little more muscle around empathy. Tuning in, listening, and trying to just appreciate or understand another person's perspective. Those of us who move at a really fast pace and really kind of act urgently, really probably need to develop some muscle around impulse control. Self-regard is another competency that comprises that humility and that being the right size. So we'll be able to size those up. If you're going to be participating in our session next week, you will receive a handout in advance, and it's a 1-page handout. You're going to want to cut out the little cards that are presented there for you so that you can use them. Hopefully you'll be sitting at a desk or at a place where you have a little workspace. We're going to work through those definitions of these EQ competencies and help you sort through which are most important to you and why. And there's a lot of things you can do with that information. A good conversation with a boss, a significant other, maybe directing some of your leadership development for yourself. So that's where we're going to go next. I hope you'll choose to participate. And I think I just said that you will be receiving that handout. So Sara at Real Good Ventures, John at Real Good Ventures for additional information. Just grateful that you would devote an hour of your time today in such an unthinkable time when there's a lot of demands, I'm sure, and a lot of things on your plate. We're grateful to have had you. And if you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to shoot those our way. Anna, thank you so much.
Sara, thank you. This has been just fantastic. So I'm going to share my screen here for a second we have our little, well, you know what? I think I was having a little computer glitch in the middle where I was panicking for a second, but I had an extra screen as well. Yes, thank you. People are excited about next week. So that's exciting. Yes, it is from noon to 1 next Wednesday. great hour of information here. And John, thank you for working on the fly there. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. As Sarah said, make sure to join us next week for the next step, and as well as the rest of this series that will run through December. So you can see the entire lineup at leadershiptoledo.org. I will throw that in the chat here right now. And then we also, you will receive it via email, but we would love for you to take, it's only like 5 questions. We would love for you to take a survey to just tell us what you liked about today, and and give us your feedback, because this is something new for us and we would love to get that feedback. So the link for the survey is in there. It's also coming to you via email, and then in the chat box, I'm sorry. And then I'm also going to put the lineup for the other series so you can see, because we have a fantastic lineup of speakers here. And Sarah, you just really set the bar very high for them. So I know we had some of them listening today. So thank you so much. And everyone, have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.